Mark Lowenthal, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
A former CIA senior analyst, what is your first gut reaction to this brouhaha between Donald Trump and the CIA?
I think it's not just Trump and the CIA. It's the president-elect and the entire intelligence community. And I think it's unfortunate that they're getting off to such an awkward start in their relationship, because they need each other. And his beginning, the way this is beginning, it isn't good. It isn't good for a long-term successful relationship for either entity or for the United States.
Can I quote for you what a former CIA director, Mike Hayden, has said? To have the president-elect of the United States simply reject the fact-based narrative that the intelligence community puts together because it conflicts with his a priori assumptions, wow. What is the actual danger of, if you like, personalizing and politicizing, intelligence?
Unfortunately, or fortunately, policymakers can reject intelligence out of hand if they disagree with it. We are not speaking ex cathedra. That's why I hate the phrase, we speak truth to power. We don't necessarily have the truth. But I think the way in which he's rejected it is really the difficult part, just dismissing it out of hand, not saying, there may be something here. I mean, we've had intelligence rejected in the past. It's always a difficult moment for the intelligence community when this happens. But there's an edge to this that I think is really the problem here.
Do you recall a particular intelligence that was rejected with consequences?
Well, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, all of the intelligence analysts said that Khrushchev was not a gambler. He would never put missiles in Cuba. He wouldn't do it. And John McCone, who was the director, said, you guys got to go back and look at this again. I think you're wrong. And it turned out McCone was right. During the 2004 election, President Bush, he'd sort of fallen out of love with us. And the Wall Street Journal was attacking us, and the vice president was attacking us, and some issue came up, and the president said publicly, look, they're just guessing. They don't know what they're doing. They're just guessing. So when moments like that happen, you realize the one thing we really want is access, not because we feel it's cool, but because we want to be there to help them make their decisions. And once you're dismissed, and once you've lost access, that's just very difficult at that point. And it's not good for the policymakers either, because they live in a continuous stream of information, and they need to stay abreast of this so when the crisis comes, they have a certain facility to deal with it easily. And in his rejecting the daily brief, that becomes a problem.
Let me play you this segment of an interview about the daily briefings and get your reaction to it.
I say, if something should change from this point, immediately call me. I'm available on 1 minute's notice. I don't have to be told, I'm like a smart person. I don't have to be told the same thing and the same words every single day for the next 8 years.
With all due respect to Mr. Trump, it's not the same thing every day. These are stories, it's like journalism. The stories develop over time, and the sooner you can immerse yourself in the story, the better you're able to deal with it when the crisis comes. And to think that you could just dip back into the information at the moment of crisis and be up to speed, I don't think he understands the nature of the problems with which he's dealing. And when you're in there in the Situation Room and discussing this, all eyes turn to the end of the table. They turn to the president for his decision. They don't turn to the vice president. And yes, sometimes it's the same story over several days, but it's not exactly the same story, because these stories develop and they have nuance. And what we would like to see is the policymakers, and we see this usually, that after they've been doing this for X number of years, they become much more facile. At a certain point, they're as good on some subjects as the briefers are, which is wonderful. But if you're just going to dip in and out at the moment of crisis, you're not going to have that wealth of knowledge and that facility at dealing with the issue.
Everybody overseas has some kind of conspiracy theory about the CIA. Is this going to give comfort to adversaries and allies?
Look, we have a very effective, very good intelligence community. We are very good at what we do. We're not perfect, but we're very good. And for adversaries to realize, oh, these fellows don't have access anymore, this is wonderful, because they won't be able to tell him things, or they'll tell him things and he won't believe it. We have just gained a tremendous advantage. And I think it gives discomfort to our allies who realize that it may be harder for them to press points with the United States, because the intelligence doesn't have its usual seat at the table.
Well, let us ask specifically then about Russia. Obviously, this is all about Russia hacking into the U.S. democratic process. And now the CIA is saying that it was doing so for the benefit of one candidate, Donald Trump, and against the benefit of the other candidate, Hillary Clinton. There is a lot of concern in Europe with upcoming elections, whether in France or in Germany, not to mention in places like the Balkans and the Baltic states. People are very concerned about the influence of the Russians in this regard. What can you tell us through your observation of the current scene?
Well, I would say that even if Russia hadn't done it at this point, they've gained a tremendous advantage just by the fact that people say they've done it. So in terms of Putin's goals, he's already won, just by people thinking he's done it. Putin clearly, he wants influence. He wants to be reaccepted as a great power. And now he's able to show, look, I can do this, or people think I can do this. So as I said, even if he hadn't done it, and I assume that there was some level of Russian cyber activity about our election, he's already gained a lot. And so now we have the German election coming up. We have the French election coming up. Those are important elections. And it's going to create doubts in these democracies about the electoral process, and that's another gain for Putin.
Let me just read you, in conclusion, something that everybody's going to wonder why I haven't asked yet, and that is that Donald Trump said about the CIA, these are the same people that said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. Right. So how do you live that down?
First of all, I was involved in that estimate, so I understand this. Sometimes we get it wrong. Nobody ever said we get it right all the time, but the fact that we got that one wrong against all the other ones that we get correct, it's a balance sheet. And on balance, obviously I'm biased, Christian, but on balance, we do very, very well. That one we got wrong. But the interesting thing about that one, and we don't have time to discuss this, the estimate didn't affect anyone's decision. Nobody made a decision to go to war based on that estimate. The estimate was wrong, no question. But the funny thing was, it had no influence on anyone's outcome. So, I mean, you have to accept the fact that sometimes we get it wrong. We don't want to, but that's just the reality of what we do, because what we do is very difficult. We are trying to guess, we're trying to judge the intentions of foreign actors. That is very difficult to do. And I think, even though we got the Iraq WMD thing wrong, time to move on. New cases, new issues, new sources, new depth of experience. Our experience dealing with Russia is much better than dealing with Saddam Hussein. I would say it's time to put that one aside.
Mark Lowenthal, thank you very much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Christiane.